and welcome to Mythmakers. Mythmakers is the podcast for fantasy fans and fantasy creatives, brought to you by the Oxford Centre for Fantasy. My name is Julia Golding, and today I am joined by my frequent podcast partner, Jacob Rennaker, who is sitting over in Seattle, and I'm sitting over in Oxfordshire. And what has brought us together across the Atlantic today is we are going to give our review of The War of the Rohirrim, the latest of the Lord of the Rings films coming out of the powerhouse that is New Zealand. So I'm sure everybody's caught up with this film by now, or at least knows it's out. It's an anime-style film, so not live action. It's directed by Kenji Kamiyama, who is a Japanese director who's known for his anime films. The script has a number of people involved. We've got Jeffrey Aldis, Will Matthews, and then closer to the old Lord of the Rings people is Phoebe Gittins and Artie Papageorgiou, who are the daughter and son-in-law of Phillippa Boyens, who many of you will know was part of the scriptwriting team on the trilogy of Lord of the Rings. And in the producer credits, we've got Peter Jackson as an executive producer, but I think the main hand on the tiller of this was Phillippa Boyens. And at the voice actors, just to give you a sense of who's who, we've got Brian Cox, well known for his part in Succession, and he plays Helm Hammerhand, and the other main person is Gaia Wise, who plays Hera, who is the main character in this story, who also happens to be Emma Thompson's daughter. I don't know if you knew that, Jacob.
I did not know that.
Yeah, when you look at her, you can think, oh, gosh, that looks like a younger Emma Thompson, and that's why. Anyway, so before we get into the nitty-gritty of our response to this film, let's go with what our star rating is. You know, what did we feel about this production? It hasn't met with huge box office success, I must put that out there. What did you feel watching it?
I enjoyed it. I thought it was a fun kind of standalone as you can get in Tolkien's Legendarium, an interconnected, thickly woven web of characters and events. But as an independent piece of storytelling, kind of drawn from Tolkien's works, I thought I enjoyed it. I didn't love it. It's not one that I'll probably be rewatching anytime soon, but kind of just the first watch through, I was entertained. I was surprised. I was pleasantly surprised in several places, and I don't know, not bothered necessarily, but just kind of there's some places that kind of tripped me up a bit from a viewing perspective, but overall, I'm glad I saw it and was happy that folks were willing to take, I don't know, it's a risk, take a risk in adapting Tolkien in this sort of format for a new generation of audiences.
Okay, thank you. So you said something which I'd written down here is I wanted to love it. I really wanted to love it. I don't love it. I like parts of it, which we will unpack. There are some things which I thought were absolutely smashing, but I had several really big problems which I couldn't overcome. So I enjoyed my evening that I spent watching it. We watched it for my husband's birthday. It was like a family viewing thing. Nobody got up and started working on their phones. You know, we didn't lose concentration. So it worked that pretty well as a viewing experience. But we also then unpicked it afterwards. You know, we weren't satisfied with some of the choices which were made. So I would say I'm on the 2.5 2-star out of 5 type.
Okay.
I'm on that kind of rating for it. Anyway, let's go and find out what worked and what didn't. So we're going to take this from the big picture of the story, and we're going to drop down through the screenplay, the animation, the voice acting, and the music in that order. So the story, Jacob, do you want to tell people, if they don't know, what this is based on?
Right. So this is based off of a sketch of sorts from your appendices in our third. If you're reading Lord of the Rings in 3 separate volumes, it's in the Return of the King volume at the very end as an end matter. Again, as a way to kind of let Tolkien put in a little bit more information. Right. Originally, he wanted to publish the Silmarillion alongside of the Lord of the Rings together, and Stanley and Unwin were not willing to go that far, but they did end up deciding to include some extra matter after, I think, the success of Fellowship of the Ring. They decided that they would be willing to put in a little bit of extra additional information about the broader world that Tolkien felt was necessary to fully understand what's happening in Lord of the Rings. And so that's included in the appendices. Appendix A has information about a number of different periods of history that impact the story of Lord of the Rings. One of which is this, right? That's impacting the Rohan, the storyline, and that's where you'll find this is somewhere buried within Appendix A of your copies of Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, and it isn't hard to find. It is hard to find, but once you find it, it's not hard to read because it's only about 2.5 pages, if that, right. Half, in fact.
Yeah.
So it won't take you long to read, and you'll see that what the animators have taken is, within that section, just a small part of it. And they've expounded upon one intriguing storyline that comes out of that section. And the Rohan culture stands out in that it's a very young culture. We're used to talking in terms of Tolkien about the elven cultures who have these sort of centuries and centuries of ages of history. But Rohan is like the new kid on the block. But to them, they feel old. Their culture is already old. So it's interesting. I like that, different perspectives of different cultures. All that is great fun. And that's one of the richness of Tolkien. So in terms of the Rohan perspective on this in the story, the voiceover is given by Miranda Otto, who is Éowyn in the Lord of the Rings films. So it is a kind of back in the mists of time. This is the story of the Shield Maiden, which of course is the basis of her character. She refers to herself being a Shield Maiden. So it's a lovely fact to choose that and pick that point up, because it's not in the Tolkien sketch. The daughter of Helm isn't even named, and she's certainly not called a Shield Maiden. So this is an invention which is fitting within the world that they've put into the story. So do you want to sort of sketch out the line of the story that they've taken from the Rohan culture without too many plot spoilers?
So conflict between, so Rohan is kind of a confederacy of different, almost like tribal units that are kind of unified under a head, and that is Helm Hammerhand, who's our kind of main character at the very beginning of the story that this really hangs on in the appendices. It's really Helm Hammerhand and what his legacy is, setting up, moving from the first line of Kings of Rohan to then our kind of following second line of kings. So Helm Hammerhand, leading a confederation of horse lords, I guess, if you want to call them, different domains, and conflict with one of them that leads to kind of a all-out battle between Helm and those who are allying themselves with him, and Freka, who's the head of the other house, and his group that was following him. Helm ends up having to escape to the Hornburg and hole up with his people, while they are then sieged during a terrible winter. And the story then kind of follows the story of the siege, and then how the siege lifts and resolves with how Rohan is settled in the aftermath of this like large, very elongated battle that took a toll on both sides, really.
For those of you who are ticking off your sort of writer points, there is an important inciting incident at the beginning, which is in the Tolkien version of this, which is Freke comes to ask for Hera, who is how they decided to name Helm's daughter. Hera's hand in marriage for his son Wolf. And Helm takes this as an insult because Freke and his chaps are from the sort of wilder edges, the Dunlendings, the wild men. If you're thinking of the Lord of the Rings films, I think it's possibly only in the extended edition. But anyway, there's a sense of these wild men are allying with Saruman in that and attacking Rohan. So it's an age-old conflict that keeps bubbling up. But at this point, Freke is kind of extending a potential olive branch, but Helm thinks he's wanting to take the throne, doesn't trust the olive branch, so they go outside and have a scrap, and Helm bashes Freke. Freke dies, and that means that Wolf, the son, is out for revenge and is poisoned, really. His whole mind and mindset is poisoned by his desire for revenge. So it drives him into sort of Jacobean revenge tragedy extremes of wanting to stamp out Helm's children, get his revenge on Hera, and so on. So that's the inciting incident at the beginning. Okay, so we have a story here which has revenge. It has a heroic woman arising to the top of her, leading her nation after everyone else has been killed. I would say that just on the level of story, while it is great to see a female-centric story in the Tolkien world, and hurrah for that. I mean, that's one of the best things about this film is that. I did like to see the idea of picking up on the Shield Maiden. Hera is accompanied by her sort of serving lady, Olwyn, who then transpires is a Shield Maiden. It's played by the rather fine actress Lorraine Ashbourne, who British people will know from TV over here. It was bugging me who she was, and then I saw her picture. I thought, oh yeah, I know exactly who you are. Great character actor over here. That is, for me, the guts of this film and why I liked it. It's a powerful story, and I feel that the tone of it is very much picked up in the rather underused song, which I think appears in the trailers, but isn't much used in the film itself, the Paris Paloma, The Rider, which I would encourage you to go and listen to on Spotify. Very moving song. And I think that's what they were going for. The words to that song are brilliant. The feel of it is just right. But they didn't quite carry it off in the actual execution of the film for several reasons. So let's drop down to the level of the screenplay. What did you feel about the way they were doing their script? Did that work for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think so. Having as a framing, kind of a script framing, story framing element, having Eowyn as your narrator, that was good, and it seemed like a natural fit, given that this culture, the Rohan culture, is kind of based on old, English, culture, and with that, the tradition of oral storytelling. And so this is, that's framed that this is stories that are told around the fire, and Eowyn is essentially telling this story to an imagined audience in Rohan, Gondor, where who knows where, we're never told.
This is one of my problems with it. So, Jacob, you're saying that, and I agree with you, and I'm saying yes, oral storytelling. But was it ever established that this was Eowyn?
that she said she doesn't say that she's Aowen.
Did I miss a blink, where it...
No, not at all. No, I think they're right that they're depending upon your familiarity with the voice, or like the preliminary material, press releases that this is who's doing that, and then waiting to the end to see, oh, Aowen, Miranda Otto is doing this. But it didn't say, she never says, I am Aowen.
Because what I wanted
Shield Maiden of Rohan.
Right at the end is I wanted it to move to, obviously they'd have to stay in an Aowen as anime character.
Yeah.
But I'd love to have seen an anime Aowen standing in front of the barrow for Hero or some sort of banner.
Yeah.
With some little chap or chapess, probably her daughter maybe. Then you can have Faramir come in and stand aside. We would have all absolutely melted at that point if that had happened. But they left it with this narrator who isn't established. We don't know who she is in terms of this.
Right.
And she's doing the classic telling and not showing thing, which is fine in oral storytelling, but it is all the way through.
Right. Yeah. She pops up every so often. It wasn't just at the beginning as kind of a prologue and then an epilogue at the end, but every so often. And that was what was part of was interesting, is how they employed the use of voiceover by the narrator, which can be used to great effect depending on how you're using it. But you're right that's it. It wasn't tied through the script to Aowen specifically and what the story is set in. And that would have been that would have been something that would have created a nice kind of tie-in, natural tie-in. And like you said, I really like your idea of having, if this Aowen's daughter teaching, passing this on, because at the very beginning she says, by her hand many great deeds were done, talking about Hera. But do not look for her tale in the old songs. There are none, right? So this is this like secret that's kind of orally passed down among women or other folks. Yeah. And this is like almost an oral only or a parallel tradition that's being preserved. And then to say that she, Aowen, as somebody who's kind of from this line, who is kind of butted up against this larger kind of patriarchal culture of Rohan, and now she's passing on this wisdom, this heroism to her daughter, that really would have been a really nice, touching kind of exclamation point on the end. There's hope, and there's hope in the following generation as well. Yeah,
there would have been a cheer. I'm sure there would have been a cheer, and there would have been the possibility for, okay, so what does that daughter do? If they wanted to expand the Tolkien universe. Yeah. Okay, so that's the voiceover. The actual going to how they're talking, I think that actually the script is quite secure, that they talk in an appropriately convincing way. I never get thrown out of the world by the way they're addressing each other. And there's some wonderful moments which kind of rise to Tolkien feeling language, like Helm doing they're quite good at Rohan kings about to go into battle. Paint the dawn red with the blood of our foes does feel kind of like it could be snippets of Tolkien put together. Someone might point out, is there somewhere? I haven't seen that particular line in that way in Lord of the Rings, but it felt right. And the way the fond interaction between Hera and her brothers felt right as well. So I actually thought the detail of the script was at the right register for the people of Rohan. A bit of humour, a bit of heroism. So I actually quite liked. I think I'd enjoy reading the script again. That wasn't my problem, really.
Yeah.
How about you? What did you think on the pacing of it?
Yeah, I didn't find myself bored. There were some slower parts, but they didn't. I didn't feel that there was anything that really dragged for me. I'll be honest. I watched it in a few different installments. I serialized it to make it fit what I was doing. So I wasn't able to sit down and watch it straight through. So perhaps my mode of watching it, and this is one of the benefits and drawbacks of watching things on streaming is you can watch it, you can choose to get up, like you said, you get on your phone. I never got on my phone while I was watching it, but you can start it and stop it, and it's not meant to be consumed in a picking it up, putting it down sort of way. But you can watch it a little more easily. So for me, I think, I didn't notice in my, kind of 2.5 sessions of watching it, there weren't, I mean, when you were sieged at the Hornburg, there were slower portions where there's longer dialogue. But there was enough in those points, enough mystery of what was happening, tension that was building outside of the gates, right? Wolf having to interact with his, Dunlending leader, that he was kind of his lieutenant in a way.
General Targ. He sounds like a character from Star Wars, actually, doesn't he?
Yes, it does. Yes,
it probably worked fine. So I did actually do the cinematic thing, sit down and watch one bite. The one bit which I sort of hummed and hard over, is the rabid Mummakill with the Watcher in the Deep octopus.
Oh yeah.
Fight.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know. This is where I feel my education in the traditions of Japanese anime might be letting me down. But I did wonder if the kind of monster fight is something which is expected within the format, the sort of Godzilla versus, I don't know, King Kong type.
Fill in the blank.
Yeah. So I did wonder about that. For me, I could completely done without that.
Yeah.
And it seemed to me not unnecessary, but I will stand corrected if it's required by the form and the director's style, and it might be pleasing the anime, the people who are coming to this as an anime film as opposed to Tolkien fans. So I'll just put that out there. For me, it was not my. I'm not really into monster fights, but there you go. Okay, so far the story, hooray for the female-centered story. Screenplay, pretty good. So it felt as though it followed on the kind of language in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. So let's go to the animation. What was your response to seeing this realized as an anime?
I appreciate seeing visual elements translated from one medium into another. So it's fun. It's interesting seeing how that works. For one of the games that I was involved working on, it was, and this has officially been announced, so I can share this, is that the one of our lines of games, a villainous game, have featured largely cartoon characters, so 2D animation, and then brought on 3D animation with Disney 3D animation and Pixar. So having those adapted into a painterly style was kind of like the house style for this series of games. So seeing the adaptation from traditional 2D to then painted or 3D, how it kind of like flattening that image to a 2D image. But now we just announced that we're doing our first live action villain that's adapted into 2D painterly animation style. So going from so it's interesting for me to see what you're taking into consideration in that, moving from the dynamism of not photorealism, because it's actual. You're taking still photos and putting them together in a sequence to create the illusion of moving images, right? So there's things that there are trade-offs from translating it into any medium. One of which is like facial expressions, right? So you have to cartoonize a person, caricaturize a person, capture, if you're wanting it to look like somebody else, getting the strongest features so that it's recognizable in this different format. And so with the animation, one of the challenges is you can't capture the same sort of level of detail of emotion in face, right, in a character's face. So here that's one of the things with anime is that you have to kind of heighten the emotions, the actions that are happening around something so that it communicates more clearly what's actually happening internally, emotionally with these people, because you can't have the sort of degree of incredible performances that we had in Lord of the Rings with these incredible actors, where you can see just the tiniest twitch in their eyebrow, the furrow of their brow, movements of the corner of the mouth. That's something that's harder to depict in animation. So you're not going to have as nuanced or layered of a visual performance with characters. So knowing that going in and what the limitations are, I appreciated visually changing that to that, not just as a replica of what a normal, if you were just to do a 1-to-1 of a human or animals, but in the style of anime, which has a different feel or flavor visually. I like seeing them translated into those, and thought that it was fun to see Lord of the Rings characters in that kind of hyper or like caricaturized realistic way, moving through this world. And there are things that you can do with that you can't if you're just doing it as strictly photorealistic. For example, Helm jumping off of the walls down from the top of the walls below to save his daughter. That's something that you'd have to do a lot if this was a film version of that, to kind of for the audience to buy that. But in this kind of like animated style, it's easier to buy a character jumping off the top of a wall and not crushing every bone in their body upon impact below. So I think there's some leeway that you can have when you move from live action to animation. And so that was fun to see them kind of exploit that in the action sequences, the stylized, some of the fight scenes. And just kind of like the dynamism of that art style, to see that applied to Middle-earth.
Okay, so this is my problem. This is my problem with the thing, which is I felt the backgrounds and some of the camera angles and the way sequences were put together were wonderful. And it's particularly pleasing that they've used what we're used to from the Lord of the Rings film. So when you see Edoras, for example, you see Edoras plus a realistic number of houses for a village, which was always a bit sparse on the set of Edoras, but they've been able to sketch in a more convincing little town. I loved all that and really enjoyed sort of spotting the familiar landscapes and seeing the extension of them in this. So the backgrounds were very good. But the foreground characters were very uneven. When you look at the stills on IMDb or even just online, the poster behind me, for example, it looks as though they're very full drawings. But actually, there are places in it where people's features are very sketchy. It's not consistently good. And particularly poor are the horses, which is a disaster in a film about Rohan. The horses don't move like horses move. And in fact, when they're galloping away, there's often this sort of gliding movement, which is something from cartooning, which is, I just didn't like it at all. So I thought it's the wrong, I came away thinking, actually, this is the wrong medium for this story. I would love them to remake this as live action with a really good actress as Hera, do it properly with actors. And I would watch that film because I think it's a strong enough story.
Yeah.
I think the anime undermines it and makes it underwhelming and a sort of, so what? So, for example, one of the things that came out for me is as well as her relationship with her father, she has a relationship with her brothers who are called something like Harma, who's the musician, and is it Haleth, who's like the warrior? I think it's that one.
Right.
And it's hardly established. Particularly, you see Harma once, but you're not even quite sure who he is. Is this guy singing? And you don't get much time to set up the emotion that when I'm sorry, it is not surprising they don't last long, because that's the fate. There's hardly any time to establish how important they are to her. And I think with something which is acted as opposed to a character, you can do that with the same number of scenes. Because if you think how the death of Theodred, how moving that is, even though we never actually see Theodred alive.
Right.
So I think the animation style is the problem. So
it's definitely it privileges the action sequences, right? At the cost of deeper character building and character work.
But even a better form of animation, there are many. I think it was the actual choice of anime for this is the mistake. There are other forms of animation which give a wider range of performance. So for me, I don't know. I suppose if you're an anime fan, maybe this is a good version of anime. I don't know. But it didn't seem that good to me. Particularly, just take a horse and look at how a horse moves. And you think, go back to, it doesn't work. So that's why I'm underwhelmed by it and why it's 2.5 stars.
Yeah.
When I actually quite like the story.
Yeah. So if the primary, so it seems like what you're saying is like if the primary audience was anime, if that's what they were hoping to grab, and that's where the money would be returned just based on anime audience, then perhaps if that's who they're wanting to please most, then great. You probably did a really good job.
I don't know, but that would take somebody who knows the format better than I do. Yeah.
Right. But if your target audience is a typical like 4-quadrant film that's appealing to a broader audience of Lord of the Rings first fans, who are not just Lord of the Rings, but like Lord of the Rings film fans, then perhaps, the visual style, like what you're expecting from the storytelling there, and the level of nuance and character explorations, that's going to be something you're going to be disappointed by based on that. So I would agree with you there.
And there's also just some, you were talking about Helm jumping down that cartoon level. Because these are humans as opposed to elves, there are some elements which they don't quite tie up. So there is this question that, has Helm become a kind of monster, a kind of Dampier type figure, like a revenant type figure, haunting outside the walls with these superhuman abilities? He's somehow some sort of magic or something happened to him. It's kind of posited and then never really answered. And it could have been the snow troll or ice troll or whatever it is. And maybe he's just a very strong man. And I found that these questions are sort of raised but not answered annoying.
They didn't. Yeah, you're right. They didn't. And I think what I did appreciate about the building up of the legend of Helm as he is stalking outside the walls and doing kind of these not surgical. They seem to be rather brutal, but kind of more focused attacks, forays into the enemy's camp, and then coming back and then returning. I thought they did a good job depicting that. It was it affected the morale of the people that were the Dunlending plus folks that were at the Hornburg, who were sieging them. This was a story. They're telling each other they're scared. They're heightening what's happening themselves, but we're not shown clearly. So we're allowed to see what they think of this. And so they're building him up to be this wraith. Then they use the word wraith, right? Specifically, that he is a wraith that is, that can't be killed. And he does this. And so we see where that's coming from. It's not coming from the folks that are on the other side of the wall. They're not saying that this is what's happening to Helm, but this is the people who he's striking fear into the hearts of. And so, I think, but in the animation itself, even when they're showing him punching, and if you see a still, like at least on IMDb, one of the stills they have is just Helm close up on his face, and his eyes are whited out, which suggests that he is supernatural, has some sort of supernatural bent to what he is doing. It's so they're definitely playing with that. They don't come on firmly either way. Now, if you're framing it as a story, that would, I think, be a good place to have the narrator come in and like clarify that, like some say X, others say Y, but in the hearts of those who feared him, he was always Z, right? So like that's somewhere where having the narrator could come in and kind of tidy up that a little bit to make clear whether or not he is actually possessed of a supernatural power, or if this is just doubling down on the kind of idea of stories and how legends arise in people's minds in the moment as well as in retrospect, through the ages.
So a couple of other little niggle points. This is, you see what we all sat around talking about after we watched the film. Another niggle point is just how unreasonable Wolf is. He's got a very good general. General Targ is actually very sensible. But his character the switch flips, and he doesn't come back at all. And so it feels there isn't a glimmer at all of anything redeeming about him, even though he's given lots of chances. So he becomes quite flat out villain, which is it makes him a problem. And unless when he dies, it's kind of, oh, that's good, he's out of the way, as opposed to the sort of, it could have been more emotion there, because he's seen his father killed. There's some reasons why he's
right.
And then there's just the really ridiculous point is about Harmer and his horse, because I think really this film could be subtitled "Men Are Stupid, Women Are Wise." It was far too much. It sailed far too much into that territory, because Harmer dies because he's taken a clapped out horse from the stable into battle. Surely there was other choices. He's the king's son. He doesn't have to take one who's going to conk out. Poor thing. So there was some sort of silly. I don't know. I suppose it went too much to making all the men flawed and really a bit daft or violent. And it's the women who come through to save the day. Because even, what's his name? Freylaf, the cousin who comes back to he becomes the new king. He's very much a afterthought. He's not really a hero. He's a bit like what I felt was going on there. It reminded me of Hamlet, where you've got Fortinbras come in and say, "Oh yeah, it's all right now. I'm here. He was a sweet prince." You come in at the end to take over without actually really having been much part of the narrative. Anyway, so I've got lots of niggles with it.
Yeah, well, I think you've highlighted something with those characters, and Hama in particular, that we didn't see him much. There wasn't much set up with him. I will say though that was, for me, on watching the scene where his horse, it looked like that was his favorite horse. This is clearly, and they set up that one of his sons was really like strong and battle hardened. The other one has a lyre and he likes singing songs. And so there's this kind of contrast of the two, which is part of the, more of the source material, I think, leaning into that a little bit. But in showing that this is this kind of reluctant prince who doesn't want to be part of the battle, and he just wants to sing songs and ride on his old horse. And then when when the horse does give out and he has to stop, and he's kind of talking there with this horse, like, for me, that was it was a sweet moment. And it was then
tragic.
I think
tragic.
It was tragic. It was absolutely tragic. So I did like that note that he was so committed to this, his favorite horse, maybe lifelong horse. I don't know. So that was, at least for me, like seeing that, it's like, okay, like that was that was kind of like a nice like little spot, but then like you could see like, like exactly what's happening. It's more of this like fear, like dread that like, okay, they're catching him, and then what are they going to do to him? So that was that on the ham end. On the wolf, I think you're right that to show him as a more multi-dimensional or conflicted character would have made it more compelling. And so I think part of that, the challenge is from the outset, you just have Freka, his wolf's father, coming in, just kind of blustery, come in demanding. He looks, visually, he looks kind of grotesque because he's larger, he's overweight, he has these, skin, he has tattoos, skin markings, and just kind of coming in and just kind of gross and demanding that the king's daughter is going to marry his son. And so he sets him out clearly as this like, one-dimensional, one-note kind of villain, whereas you kind of see Wolf there a bit
you
not
see
fully
the childhood friends as well. So
yeah. We do see that. So I would have liked. I think what would have liked to have seen is something that showed Wolf's relationship with Freka a little bit more, even as they're just like coming up to the king, or Wolf's reaction to his father. Could have been a couple lines, even one line of dialogue between the two to establish this is their relationship. And so if you saw the love for whatever reason that Wolf had for his father, then seeing his father that you already see that they have an emotional connection, to see that taken away from him, ripped away from him, then I think that would make it more convincing and clear. Not that it's not just a duty that he has as a son to by tradition that he has to avenge his father, but if there was something that more of an emotional tie between them, then that would show how his emotions played into that, similar to his emotions. I think they did communicate a little bit, at least exposition wise, that Wolf was attracted to Hera and always wanted to end up with him. That was always the hope. She saw them always as just friends. And so like the flashback scene I thought was nice to at least establish that they're kind of friends as a bit, but I think deepening that would have been really helpful, and to show him being more conflicted than, like you said, just kind of like flipping the switch, and now he's just full evil and just running them into the ground, or trying to do so, even after they had technically won, when Helm had died and the crown was not on his head anymore. It seemed it was hard to engage emotionally with the film at that point. It was just kind of waiting out what's inevitably going to happen, that he's going to run his resources dry and that people of Rohan are going to escape. So it wasn't as interesting emotionally because of Wolf's kind of, you're right, that kind of like one note, irredeemable evil with no, unalloyed and with no real compunctions or inner conflict. That was something that I think would have deepened and enriched it.
That's my problem with that character. I think the voice acting was strong throughout. I think everyone was well cast. I got no grumbles with that. Brian Cox makes a good, Helm Hammerhand. And I thought Hera, Gaia Wise was very good at her part. A lovely, rich tone to her voice. All of that I thought was really strong. I don't know about you. Any quibbles there?
No, I mean, I was delighted for the cameo of Merry and Pippin.
Oh yeah,
Dominic Monaghan and Billy Boyd featuring as a couple of the two trolls that are featured in there. That it's additional material in an attempt to kind of tie it into.
Technically, they're orcs in the company of a troll.
Yes,
something like that. Anyway, it's not much.
Exactly. Yeah.
And they're collecting rings, which is a big wink. Oh yeah, Sauron's after rings. Yeah.
So it was fun, and to see the actually using Christopher Lee's voice at the end, to have Christopher Lee make an audio appearance after the fact. Like, so that was fun. I will say, I didn't know what to think. I had to think about that one for a while to see if it was earned. Showing at the very end, Saruman coming in and using Christopher Lee's voice, was a nice cameo. But really mostly, or if not entirely, just a nod and a wink to the audience, the people who are there from the films, who are there from like the Lord of the Rings films, not because that didn't add anything at all to the story itself, the self-contained story.
Yeah, and I think they got permission from the estate to dig through the archives and find his voice, which is great because he was such a Tolkien aficionado. So one of the very, very strongest parts of the film is the music. So it's composed by Stephen Gallagher based on the themes that Howard Shore created. And then I've already mentioned the rather wonderful underused song by Paris Paloma. I thought that was great. And I've been listening to the soundtrack and thinking this really does deepen my response to the material. What's about?
Yeah, I like the reworking. Yeah, that it was, taking that theme, the Rohan theme, and building it out and using it in different ways. So it didn't feel like it was derivative. It wasn't just like trying to copy Howard Shore, but I enjoyed it. I thought, that it added to it. It maintained that environment. So like the feeling that you get that initially that, that Howard Shore was able to establish with that feel, the violins of Rohan, then turning that into the kind of like background music for the entire film. It was good. I enjoyed it as well.
So in sum, we've got the thing here where the story is pretty satisfying, not too bad. A couple of things we might want to re-edit, but not too bad. A good choice to go with the Shield Maidens. Some things which could have been better, but for me the problem was the choice of animation style not fitting, not working for me. But I do have time for the story. No, that I do have time for the story. So a bit of a miss, in the same way as The Hobbit was a bit of a miss. The material promising, but actually, bit of a miss. So the question is, what are your thoughts now as this group, the Peter Jackson, Phillippa Boyens, Fran Walsh, Andy Serkis, and so on, take on The Hunt for Gollum, which is
that's a good question.
Live action film, and The Hunt for Gollum fits in. Again, it's appendices material, and bits of storytelling in Lord of the Rings, but it's a prequel to Lord of the Rings. Thoughts on?
So this is to take maybe a bit of a step back to then answer this, or to hear. I'd love to hear, Julia, how you thought from this. So this was clearly by including Miranda Otto to imply that Éowyn is the one who is speaking, this story, by including orcs who are searching for a ring, who's tied to who say the word Mordor, to tie it, to put rings there, by bringing in Saruman, Christopher Lee's voice there, by including eagles, the Mumakil, the Watcher, by including those characters. They're clearly trying to tie it to the larger Lord of the Rings films. So my question for you, Julia, is how much do you feel this film for you recontextualize the Lord of the Rings films for you, or for maybe for a broader audience? Was there anything that you saw, like after walking away from this film, that deepened an appreciation for any of the motivations, or just like background, broader understanding of the world of the Lord of the Rings films?
Well, I think what it did do, but didn't do quite right, is it does explore the idea of what a shield maiden might be, and where the warrior women would have been in this world. And I thought that was good. I like that. It's not really within Tolkien, though. But if you're going to spin off something, it's in the cracks of the history. So you understand what tradition Éowyn feels she is following. And I thought that was great, because she is so isolated in Rohan. She's the only woman we see, other than background actors. So I think that is what I value from it. And extrapolating from that, if the hunt for Gollum is able to draw out of that prequel material Arwen's story and some more feminized, have more women in the story, perhaps Aragorn's mother, for example, those sorts of characters, I think that would be interesting to see. And something new to say, because again, you've got the problem that they have pieces of Tolkien which are sketched out. They're not fully realized plots. So they're going to have to fill out which characters they're choosing to put in. But they could say, oh yes, by the way, this world also involved women, you know. And you could even go further back, of course, into more of Gollum's past, because the stores had the matriarchal families. You could go back further than that. I don't know if they'll want to do that, because, of course, I think it's Return of the King, you see him fighting with Deagol, don't you? So they've already done a little bit of the prequel material there, but it's just two proto-hobbits on their own. It's not in their context. So there are choices they can make. But I'm going to flip the question back to you. It seems as though in order to ensure an audience, they're thinking of rounding up the old team. So Viggo Mortensen is being mentioned. Ian McKellen is being mentioned. Orlando Bloom is being mentioned. Notice the women haven't been mentioned, but they've been mentioned.
Right. Yeah.
With the talk of using de-aging technology. Now, I remember, if you watch the making of videos about The Hobbit, one of the reasons why Peter Jackson got really excited about it, because he wanted to use this new higher frame rate technology, which turned out to be one of the things that made The Hobbit look really odd, because the eyes don't read it as real. And also the spreading out the material over too long was also another problem there. And I'm worried that the team are going to get really excited about this digital technology, use older actors to reprise roles which they did really well 20 years ago. And they're not brave enough to say, let's go and find the new Viggo.
Yeah, pass the torch.
The new Orlando Blooms and the new Ian McKellens. Surely the torch does need to be passed on, or else give somebody else a chance.
Right.
This is my feeling.
Yeah.
Have actors without having like masses of digital post-production work. That's my feeling.
Yeah, and that's good. And so I see that the conundrum that they're in, which is they want to capture the previous audience, but also try to make it accessible for other people as well. And so if you lean too far on the nostalgia, then that's not going to be enough to take you in, or it's just going to age out as soon as those characters are too old to play even digitally versions of themselves. Or are you willing to do something different? So this is what they chose to do with Rings of Power, which we've talked about previously, is recasting an Elrond, right? So Hugo Weaving is this iconic character, right? Galadriel, Kate Blanchett. How do you find somebody? They presumably could have used Hugo Weaving or Kate Blanchett if they would have had the budget, which it sounds like with Amazon they did, to just use those characters and de-age them to keep that. But they used new characters, which for some was probably a little jarring, because in their mind, the platonic ideal of Galadriel is Kate Blanchett, and which I personally happen to believe. But to see the difference, it takes there is a learning curve there, but it does make for a more convincing. You're right that sometimes the technology, or knowing that this is not actually how they look, or if it's not entirely seamlessly convincing, there's always going to be something that is causing you to suspend your belief in the actor or the performance. But yeah, it would certainly be nice to see somebody who has, in the same universe of Viggo Mortensen, which I don't know that you can, from what I've heard, you cannot replicate Viggo ever, worlds without end, just on how unique of an individual he is. But find somebody else who is equally as unique, who is still kind of in that same general vein. I would love to see a chance given to other actors to do something really important, right, and really meaningful as a way to help them.
Yeah, I mean,
to further the story in the world.
The Star Wars universe have had to deal with this. So Ewan McGregor being cast to replace Alec
Guinness.
Thank you, Alec Guinness. Nobody goes, I hate Ewan McGregor. They just say,
right,
played by a younger actor. And he shades his voice so that there is a feeling of continuity.
Right. Right.
I'm just worried that all the budget's going to go on Peter Jackson aiming to escape Uncanny Valley, because digital enhancements really still read odd.
Yeah.
The deep fake thing.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need to spend the money on that. You could spend the money getting a new actor.
Yeah.
Giving your older actors cameos or some sort of role or something.
Yeah.
If you want to keep the team together, but actually letting a younger band come along. Anyway, so they're not listening to us, I don't suppose.
They don't, yeah. But I think
too much money is riding on this. But I would, I particularly in the case of Ian McKellen, who's in his 80s, if he's really, why not the chap who plays him in The Rings of Power is doing a pretty good job. You can find somebody who can do it well. Right. And be able to ride a horse and hunt for Gollum properly.
And I think if they hope to escape, they can never escape the gravity of the original films. No. So that's a given. So it's the question is, how are you going to approach it? If you want to make this as just another continuation and extension of that, or are you wanting to set this as a film that in its own right somebody can come to, can be completely captivated by, for those, because this is Lord of the Rings was 20 plus years ago. And so there's a new generation of film goers, audience members who, right. Yeah. So that, if you want to appeal to a new audience, that's a great way to do that, is find compelling actors who are of the age of these characters as they're appearing in the story, and not just de-aging the actors who played these roles 20 plus years ago. That could be, and to make sure that the story itself is tight, right? Is self-contained, it's fulfilling, it's immersing. And then if that's your kind of gateway for younger audiences to then go in and be captivated by the films, to even go see extended, to then be willing to give The Hobbit a chance, or War of the Rohirrim, to step into the broader Tolkien world, and maybe even they pick up a book and read, Lord of the Rings and and pick that and get immersed there. So, but the only way to do that is not by is just kind of going back to the well and just kind of retreading the same tropes and using the same actors. It's to find something that's energizing, right, and compelling, and a story that speaks to, that ties into the source material, but also is able to speak on like a primal, almost like archetypal level to a newer audience. And that if you can do that while also deepening the experience of those longtime fans, then that is the best possible outcome of something like this, which I'm going to hope for.
Yeah.
And that's all I can really do.
As the film poster says, hope has yet to abandon these lands.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jacob.
But it's getting real. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you very much for talking to me about the War of the Rohirrim.
Thanks for listening to Mythmakers podcast, brought to you by the Oxford Centre for Fantasy. Visit oxfordcenterforfantasy.org to join in the fun. Find out about our online courses, in-person stays in Oxford, plus visit our shop for great gifts. Tell a friend and subscribe wherever you find your favorite podcasts worldwide.